Moments like this don't happen often on American television. It was a special broadcast of Tucker Carlson Tonight, and the guest was none other than Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He was there to defend the billions of dollars in U.S. aid flowing into his country. But sitting across from him was someone who had openly criticized that aid time and time again, Tucker Carlson. The debate had been hyped for days, sparking heated discussions on social media. How will Zelensky handle Tucker? Are Americans finally going to find out where their money is going? The anticipation was through the roof. The cameras rolled. The studio lights hit Tucker's face. He was as confident as ever, looking straight into the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's not just another interview. Over $100 billion has been sent to Ukraine. That's taxpayer money, your money. And yet, do we actually know where it's going? Tonight, we ask that question to the one person who should have the answers, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Mr. President, welcome to the show. On the other side of the screen, Zelensky adjusted his jacket and gave a slight nod. His face was tense but composed. Thank you, Mr. Carlson. I'm glad to be here because Ukraine and America share the same mission, defending freedom. Tucker gave a small, knowing smile. He placed his hands firmly on the desk and got straight to the point. Mr. President, the United States has given Ukraine over $100 billion so far. Do we, the American people, have a clear picture of where that money has gone? Should taxpayers be okay with financing another country's war? Zelensky took a deep breath. Mr. Carlson, the aid America provides isn't just for Ukraine. It's for the entire free world. If we fall, who's next? Europe? America? This is not just a war, it's a fight for democracy itself. Tucker raised an eyebrow. But are you actually being held accountable for how that money is spent? Because a lot of Americans are wondering where it's going. There's serious concern in Washington. Some reports suggest corruption inside Ukraine. How do you respond to that? The tension in the studio thickened. Zelensky's eyes narrowed slightly. That's just Russian propaganda. Ukraine is constantly monitored by international observers. Not a single dollar has been misused. Tucker shook his head slightly. Then why is the Biden administration avoiding transparency? Why won't the Pentagon confirm where this money is going? If it's all above board, why can't the American people see it? Zelensky leaned back slightly. Because we're in a war. Right now, transparency isn't the priority. Winning is. Our cities are being bombed. Our people are dying. America needs to trust us. Tucker squinted. But Mr. President, America can't write a blank check forever. Every dollar sent to Ukraine is a dollar taken from the American people. We're giving you weapons, money, and diplomatic support. What is Ukraine giving back to the American people? Zelensky paused for a moment, then responded without hesitation. You're asking what we've given you. Let me tell you, Mr. Carlson, Ukraine is fighting your biggest enemy, Russia, with our own blood. We are fighting so your soldiers don't have to. While our cities are bombed, your cities remain safe. If we lose, you're next. The internet exploded. Zelensky says Ukraine is fighting for America's safety. Some called it a powerful statement. Others weren't buying it. But Tucker wasn't backing down. How do you explain that to Americans struggling with inflation, unemployment, and rising costs? They're barely making ends meet, and you're telling them their tax dollars are going to Ukraine. Do you think that's fair? Zelensky slowly shook his head. Is America's leadership measured in dollars? Every time I come to Washington, I'm promised support. But now, suddenly, you're counting the cost? Let me tell you something, Mr. Carlson. If this war ends, the ones who will pay the highest price won't be us. It'll be America, because one day it'll be your turn. The studio fell completely silent. Tucker leaned in slightly, a small smirk forming. And who gets to decide that? You or the American people? Zelensky took a deep breath. The first round was over, but the real fight was just beginning. For the first few minutes, the studio remained relatively calm, but the tension between Tucker Carlson and Zelensky was now impossible to ignore. Neither was backing down. Tucker leaned back in his chair, locking eyes with Zelensky. Mr. Zelensky, you keep asking for more and more support from America, but the American people are starting to ask a different question. Does Ukraine have an endgame? When does this war actually end? Or is Washington just going to keep sending Kyiv money forever? Zelensky narrowed his eyes. He knew this question was coming. You're asking when the war will end, Mr. Carlson. Let me ask you this instead. Did America know when World War II would end? Did American soldiers fighting for freedom ask, when does this stop? Or did they focus on liberating the occupied territories? Tucker nodded. But there's a difference, Mr. Zelensky. In World War II, America was directly involved. Right now, we're paying for Ukraine's war. American soldiers aren't fighting, but American taxpayers are funding your military. Is this an endless commitment? Zelensky leaned forward slightly. The American people should support Ukraine's fight because this isn't just Ukraine's war. If we fall, Europe's security is at risk. Russia won't stop here. The Baltic states, Poland, maybe even Germany. If that happens, it'll be too late for America to act. Tucker smirked. So, what you're saying is, if America doesn't pay now, it'll have to pay for an even bigger war later. But Mr. Zelensky, the American people want to know, are these billions of US dollars really making America safer? Or is this just another political game being played in Washington? Zelensky's face tensed. That question put him on the defensive. Our fight is not a game, Mr. Carlson. We are dying every day. Kyiv is being bombed, Mariupol was wiped out, thousands of Ukrainian women and children have been killed. Do you really think this is some political maneuver? Tucker tilted his head slightly. Let me ask you something else, Mr. Zelensky. Is there corruption inside the Ukrainian government? Even the Pentagon says they can't fully track where the US aid is going. No one in Washington can say for sure if the money is actually reaching your soldiers and your people. Can you guarantee that? Can you look the American people in the eye and tell them that every cent of the $100 billion we've sent is being spent the way it should be? Zelensky didn't break eye contact, but his tone hardened. Expecting a perfect system in the middle of a war is unrealistic, Mr. Carlson. Our priority is survival. The aid from America is keeping the Ukrainian military alive. This is war, not a financial audit. Tucker leaned back slightly, pausing for a moment. Then he pressed on. All right, let me put it another way. Should the American people keep funding Ukraine? How do you justify that to them? Because right now, many Americans are struggling with inflation. Grocery prices are skyrocketing. Rent is unaffordable. Families can barely send their kids to school. So why should billions of dollars go to Ukraine instead? Zelensky's eyes flashed for a moment. He chose his words carefully. Because freedom isn't free, and no one understands that better than the American people. If the United States won't lead the world, then who will? Russia? China? If you don't step up now, you'll lose much more in the future. That response sent shockwaves across social media. Twitter exploded. Zelensky says America is obligated to pay for Ukraine. Tucker Carlson exposes the Ukraine funding scandal. Where's the money really going? Tucker went for the final blow. Mr. Zelensky, my last question is this. How much more money should America send? Give me a number. 50 billion, 100 billion, 500 billion, be straight with us. Zelensky paused. Clearly, he wasn't prepared for that question. Then, tilting his head slightly, he answered, "We don't ask for money, we ask for freedom, but freedom is never free." Tucker smiled slightly. And should the American people be the ones paying that price? The studio erupted. Some in the audience clapped, others booed. Tucker Carlson had just delivered one of the toughest challenges yet to Zelensky. When the debate ended, the studio fell silent. The cameras had stopped rolling, but the tension in the air was still thick. Tucker Carlson leaned back in his chair, giving a slight nod. Zelensky, his face unreadable, stood up. He had chosen his words carefully, but he knew exactly where this conversation had gone. And within minutes, the impact of that moment exploded far beyond the studio walls. It had ignited a national firestorm. As soon as the broadcast ended, social media went into overdrive. Clips of the debate spread like wildfire, racking up millions of views in seconds. The hashtag #, Zelensky versus Tucker, shot to the top of Twitter's trending list. The public was split. Zelensky's supporters claimed he wasn't just defending Ukraine, but democracy itself, the freedom of the entire Western world. Zelensky destroys Tucker Carlson. America's global leadership can't be measured in dollars. If Ukraine falls, America is next. Zelensky is absolutely right. Meanwhile, Tucker Carlson's audience saw things very differently. Zelensky couldn't even say how much more money Ukraine needs. Tucker Carlson takes on Washington's blank check policy for Ukraine. Why should American taxpayers fund another country's war? The debate didn't just shake up social media. It sent shockwaves through the mainstream media as well. CNN and MSNBC rushed to defend Zelensky, emphasizing his warnings about global security. One analyst on a CNN panel put it bluntly, "Zelensky is reminding America of its role in the world. If Ukraine falls, instability in Europe will skyrocket. And in the long run, that's a far greater risk for the US." But over at Fox News and other conservative outlets, the focus was entirely different. No one knows where the billions sent to Ukraine are actually going. Washington owes the American people answers. While Americans struggle with rising costs, why are we sending endless aid to Ukraine? Then came the moment the White House couldn't ignore. The next day, in a packed press briefing, a reporter fired the question everyone was waiting for. The debate between Zelensky and Tucker Carlson has clearly divided public opinion. What does the Biden administration say to Americans who are questioning continued aid to Ukraine? The White House press secretary chose her words carefully. America's support for Ukraine remains firm, but we understand the economic concerns of the American people. President Biden is committed to helping Ukraine defend its freedom while also addressing the priorities of American families. That answer did not calm the storm. It only fueled it further. On social media, criticism poured in. Some accused the administration of dodging the real issue, while others argued they weren't being strong enough in their support for Ukraine. Even Elon Musk jumped into the debate with a short but striking tweet. The American people deserve to know where their money is going. Can we really fund foreign aid forever? Meanwhile, Hollywood celebrities voiced their support for Zelensky. A leader fighting for freedom shouldn't be questioned like this. Democracy must be defended. But one of the most surprising things? Zelensky's silence. Unlike his usual swift responses to global events, he made no public statements after the debate, no press conferences, no social media posts. For someone who normally seized every opportunity to speak out, this was different. A few days later, a journalist caught up with him and asked if he had any comment on his exchange with Tucker Carlson. Zelensky's response was brief. "I have a war to fight. Debates don't win battles, actions do." That single sentence triggered yet another wave of discussion. Supporters praised his focus. Critics called it an excuse. But the real impact of this debate wasn't just on social media or cable news. It was in the minds of the American people. Some were now more convinced than ever that Ukraine needed America's support. Others felt just as strongly that Tucker Carlson was right. America had done enough, and it was time to stop sending money overseas. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just a television debate. This was America questioning its role in the world. So, what do you think? Should America continue to support Ukraine? Or is it time to put America first